Recently, I shared some exciting news about a new Tales of Atonement project taking place on our Patreon page, Tales of Atonement Glitch. If you missed part 1, I encourage you to check it out. These videos work in tandem together, but there's no correct order to watch them in. It's an alternate version of history, in which case a lot of myths or conspiracies were actually true, like the Y2K glitch. That's the starting basis for Tales of Atonement Glitch. This is a story set in the late 90s and follows two main characters separated not only by international borders, but by an entire continent. What if the Y2K glitch actually did what people feared it would? That's the devastating question our universe answers. Around the late 90s, an anxiety started spreading through the general public based on the potential effects of a computing glitch that was said to affect older computer systems. The fear was that because the year was coded in most computers as 19XX, with the variable being the year, this meant that when the year 2000 turned over, computer systems would read it as being 1900 and cause a computing error that would confuse thousands of computer systems worldwide, causing them to shut down. It was said this would shut down power grids, malfunction plane guidance systems, confuse weapons defenses, and cause everything from banks to prisons to freak out when their security systems failed. So think of that. What if, in 1999, the world ground to a halt? For North America, in the middle of January winter, before the effects of climate change basically ruined the concept of a white Christmas. This is a telling of alternative history, based on the dimension where Bree and I come from. For us, this is actual history. Enter our main characters, Layla Castile. Although her first name is Selena, she doesn't use it much on account of the late famous singer of the same name. During the 1990s, Selena Quintanilla Perez quickly became one of the most celebrated Mexican-American singers of the 20th century. She tragically died in 1995 at only the age of 23 due to a fatal gunshot wound in Corpus Christi, Texas. Then Governor George W. Bush named April 16th as a holiday in her honor, which also happens to be the late performer's birthday. So, Layla, as I'll be referring to her now, is of Cuban descent, her mother being a refugee of the Cuban Revolution, and her father a United States citizen from Puerto Rico. In our timeline, Puerto Rico was granted statehood back in 1958, shortly after Hawaii, but Cuba still suffered the lingering effects of the United States interference, leading to a destabilization of their government and leading to the influx of refugees from the area fleeing the adverse effects of Fidel Castro's descent into authoritarianism. Her goal is the same as Aaron: get to St. Louis, Missouri, and meet at the Gateway Arch. But starting in Florida instead of Canada comes with its own different set of challenges. Layla's in the Deep South as a young woman of color during a time of total government collapse and the potential threat of nuclear war. But hey, at least it's warm, but it won't be forever the further north she goes. While the Eagles, our paramilitary allegory, are still a considerable threat, Layla has allies in the name of Roger Best, a rookie cop who quickly gets everything he thought he knew thrown back in his face. The close proximity to Roger, however, draws Layla into the political intrigue of the time and the role of the keepers in this story. Do they usher in the fall of the United States, or do they try to prevent it? Maybe a little of both. Believe it or not, there's a significance of the building behind her in this picture. Based in Miami, Florida, where Layla and her family live, this is the Freedom Tower, or Torre de la Libertad. This is a building with an extremely decorated history, and while it's not quite as exciting as a World Expo Center and Science World, this is the former headquarters of the Miami News, originally completed in 1925 as an example of Mediterranean Revival-styled architecture, based on the bell tower of the Seville Cathedral in Seville, Spain. At the time of its grand opening, Freedom Tower was the tallest building in Miami. During the 1960s, when Layla's mother was born, the United States government used Freedom Tower as a facility to process and document refugees from the Cuban Revolution, providing medical care, dental services, and other things. This earned Freedom Tower a local moniker, Ellis Island of the South. After the 1970s, when the influx of refugees died down, the feds sold the building to private buyers, and shortly thereafter it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Following this, the building remained closed for the better part of a decade, leading to general disuse and decay until it was reopened in 1987. Many of the art installations, including a mural painted in the 1930s, had completely decayed by this time. Talk about a waste of good art. The Miami artisans were commissioned to recreate the New World mural in 1988 in the Grand Hall on the second floor. This floor, however, is often limited to the public. Central to the mural is a poem by Edwin Markham that celebrates Spanish conquistador Juan Ponce de Leon, who originally arrived in Puerto Rico in 1508 and then in Florida in 1513. Here once by April breezes blown, you came, O gallant de Leon, sailed up this friendly ocean stream to find the wells of ancient dream, the fountain by the poets sung, where life and love are ever young. You found it not, O prince, and yet the wells that make the heart forget are waiting here with some touch of some immortal sphere. For here below these skies of gold we have forgotten to grow old. Here in this land where all the hours dance by us, treading upon flowers. As we can see, the poem is talking about Leon's infamous, although fictional, voyage to find the fabled Fountain of Youth. What's strange about this version of the poem, though, is that it's claimed he never found it. However, there are accounts of certain Fey records that a man from Iberian proper once drank forbidden waters that helped him age as the Fey do. This apparently greatly upset the guardians of this fountain, and Leon was taken, never allowed to return to the human world, and a changeling was sent back to Puerto Rico in his place. But I guess that makes sense. Humans like to think they're way smarter than they are, way more keen and observant. They can always tell many things from a person's gender to a Fae when they see one, right? Well, anyway, restorations to Freedom Tower after its decade-long closure totaled around $25 million. As of September 2025, the iconic tower recognized its 100th year, and tickets to tour the building have since come available. Hell, maybe this will help serve as a reminder to people who always seem to desperately need the memo. Refugees, immigration, migrants have always been an important part of American culture. The first whites were immigrants fleeing religious persecution from the Church of England. And ever since then, the United States has been hard at work destabilizing any region that doesn't adhere to its ideals. This, in turn, creates a lot of people in need of sanctuary, and as such, it's become a beacon of the closest stable economy in the Western world. Look, there's a lot I could say about that, but I get the sense that some of you have already checked out. If not, drop a like and comment your favorite Latin singer down below. Is it Selena? Jennifer Lopez? Bad Bunny? Maybe Celia Cruz? She was actually memorialized at Freedom Tower back in 2003. More than 200,000 in attendance to pay their respects. So by now, especially with those of you who have watched both videos, I know you're probably itching to know more about the characters themselves. But for that, I'd have to say, just wait until their bingo book pages. I don't want to give away too much of the plot just yet until you guys get a chance to experience it. That being said, whenever I brush close to these hard, factual topics, I always stumble. I second guess myself. I feel like no one wants to hear this, or does this pertain to our story at all? I keep thinking I'm going too far off and not sticking to the topic, but I'm thinking now as I make this video that maybe that's the point. Why shouldn't I talk about it? Why shouldn't I talk about how the United States government constantly sends military operations to other countries, destabilizes the region, creates millions needing refuge, and then blames the refugees for coming? What's the difference between Cuba in the 1960s and Venezuela now? Nixon was responsible for much of the Cuban conflict, like Trump is culpable for Venezuela. And why? Why? Communism. The anathema to the capitalists in power. And that's a bipartisan problem. Kamala Harris called Trump a communist. He isn't. Trump called Biden a communist. He isn't. These people sling that term around as a pejorative without seemingly having any clue what it means. But the real truth of the matter is, they know exactly what it means. and they fear it like a forest fears fire. The 1960s marked a revolution in Cuba. The then president turned dictator Fulgencio Batista led a military coup in 1952 with financial aid and military logistics backing from the United States government. Batista's goal was the suppression of communistic ideals. But what were those ideals? Communism, as is defined by Karl Marx, another name corporate Democrats and conservative Republicans can't stand, is a classless, stateless society where all property is owned collectively and everyone works and shares according to their own ability and needs. A lot of people take that to mean, or try to convince people that it means, you wouldn't be able to own your own home, or a car, or hell, even a toothbrush. That's the propaganda. Marxist communism still differentiates between private, personal, and public property. Personal property under this definition are things a person individually owns. Homes, vehicles, tools, food, etc. Private property refers to the resources that create the things we own. Factories, mines, heavy machinery. These things are owned collectively by the general public and able to be used by anyone who needs them. Social classes disappear. There are no rich people, but there are no poor people. Everyone is given enough resources to support their needs. What does it all mean? Marx saw human needs as historically and socially shaped. These ideas would change and evolve as society did, but they were always meant to be tied to material life. Things like food, shelter, clothing, healthcare, and education. Once we could assure these things were taken care of, we could move on to things like cultural and creative fulfillment, art, community, and personal growth and wellness. So picture this. You go out one day in a communistic society and decide you want to go get a burger and some new shoes and watch a movie. Well, first off, you don't have to worry about paying rent because your shelter is provided for you. Now you just go to the restaurant where the people working there all do so because of a shared love of food and service to the community. These are workers that do this job just because they love to do it, not because if they don't, they'll wind up on the street. There's no money, so you just order a burger and sit down to eat. You can get just as much food as you need to sate your hunger and move on to the movie. Because art and cultural needs are being pursued by people who aren't living paycheck to paycheck, it means there's no industry grind, no corporatization. Art that gets made is exactly the kind of art that the creator wants to make. No need to appease an algorithm or cater to special interests. After that, you stop by and grab your new shoes. This would be done not by just walking into a Payless or a Walmart shoe department, but by someone who's actually making the shoes because they can. This is what they want to do. So even the quality of our goods goes up because these are being made and produced by people who have the knowledge, the passion, and the know-how to do it, rather than just a corporate machine churning out slop. At the end of the night, on your way back home, you stumble off the corner and fall, spraining your wrist. So then just go to the doctor. There's no payment necessary, which means doctors are doctors because they want to be, not because it gets them ahead the most. Ideally, under communism, people are following their dream careers and doing so just because it's what they're passionate about. We know this works in human society because it's happened before. First Nation tribes were basically communist, if we want to apply a modern definition. And studies done during the 2019-2020 lockdowns indicate that when people in society are being taken care of, they still find work to do, things to make, ideas to pursue, and things to invent. We wouldn't need AI to come up with the ideas for us while we're all stuck in a permanent state of survival because everyone would just have what they needed. Everyone. The problem is communism can't really be done on individual nations level. Not true communism. Communism would have to be a global effort. Like Star Trek. That's a communist society. Additionally, we could also adapt Marx's definition of needs to include Maslow's hierarchy. This would include things that Marx already acknowledged, like the physiological needs of food and water, and then also things like safety, security, and stability. Maslow also added in love and belonging, so relationships, and in a community where people aren't always at each other's throats to get ahead, you see fostering of more community and like-minded people. Because of this, people's self-esteem rises. They get more respect and recognition for just being the sort of people that they are, and not something that they produce to themselves to appease a corporation or a job. And this, of course, would lead to more self-actualization, the top of Maslow's pyramid. In Batista's case, this looked like control over Cuban sugar production. He aligned with the wealthiest landowners who owned the largest sugar plantations and presided over a stagnating economy that widened the gap between rich and poor Cubans. Sound familiar yet? Eventually, it reached the point where most of the sugar industry was in U.S. hands and foreigners owned 70% of the arable land. Now think Argentinian beef. Batista's repressive government then began to systemically profit from the exploitation of Cuba's commercial interests by negotiating lucrative relationships both with the American mafia and with large multinational companies who were awarded lucrative contracts. To quell the growing discontent among the populace, which was displayed through frequent student riots, protests, and demonstrations, Batista established tighter censorship of the media while also utilizing his bureau for the repression of communist activities, secret police, to carry out wide-scale violence, torture, and public executions. The result? Socialist ideas became more influential, leading to a wide-scale rebellion led by none other than Fidel Castro and his brother Raul. Though initially their rebellion failed, during his court hearing, Castro launched into a 2-hour-long speech that won him national fame, in which he laid out all of his grievances of Batista's dictatorship that was fueled by American capitalism. The Castros were then forced to flee into exile and began consolidating their strategy in Mexico, with yet another notorious name, Che Guevara. Guevara has become the face of online spaces that support communistic rebellion in many countries, and that's not surprising. Guevara was a medical student who traveled through South America and became appalled by the poverty, hunger, and disease. In order to counteract what he saw as capitalist exploitation of Latin America by the United States, Guevara became involved in Guatemala's social reforms under President Jacobo Arbenz. Arbenz would later be overthrown with help of the CIA at the behest of the United Fruit Company, an American-owned multinational company that traded fruit grown in Latin American plantations to the United States and Europe. People like Castro and Guevara were enemies of the United States because they opposed capitalist control over food production in their respective countries. They joined forces in Mexico and returned to Cuba to eventually overthrow Batista and develop Cuba into a Marxist-Leninist, one-party socialist state. Americans who grew up in the 80s and 90s were taught that Fidel Castro and Che Guevara were violent authoritarians, and to some extent they were. Castro's policies included expanding healthcare and education, but also seized state control of the media and suppressed internal dissent. Abroad, Castro supported anti-imperialist revolutionary groups, backing the establishment of Marxist governments in Chile, Nicaragua, and Grenada, as well as sending troops to aid allies in Yom Kippur, Ogaden, and Angolan Civil War. These actions, coupled with Castro's leadership of the non-aligned movement from 1979 to 1983 and the Cuban medical internationalism, increased Cuba's profile on the world stage. Following the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, Castro led Cuba through the economic turndown of the Special Period, embracing environmentalist and anti-globalization ideas. In the 2000s, Castro forged alliances in the Latin American Pink Tide, namely with Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, and formed the Bolivarian Alliance for the Americas. In 2006, Castro transferred his responsibilities to Vice President Raul Castro, who was elected to the presidency by the National Assembly in 2008. Castro died at age 90 from natural causes in November of 2016. Ongoing tensions are still prevalent between the United States and Canada for these reasons, and the coloring of Cubans as enemies has been an intentional choice to dissuade Americans from adopting similar ideals. I want to warn you guys, politics isn't my strong suit. Bree had helped me a lot with this stuff. The country we live in operates as a democratic socialist model where workers control the means of production and the governing class protects those means from outside influence, control, and theft. We actually have a system in place where an approval or disapproval rating of our given politicians is updated in real time, and dropping too low can result in an immediate impeachment and removal, even those we title as king and queen, which I'll leave that alone for now. For now, I'm going to look forward to more Tales of Atonement stories on here and on our Patreon page, so definitely check that out if you're interested. I want to thank every one of you once again this week for coming to these ramblings of an anxiety-ridden pyromancer
and her dragon best friend. We're a small team just doing our best to bring our stories we've loved for decades, and hope they're the kind you like too.
With a side info dump of psychology, lore, history, and social awareness.
If this is your first video, we hope you'll stay for another one. And maybe you could consider becoming a subscriber. We'd love to see you again.
Our subscribers can move mountains for a channel like this. The engagement we get just keeps growing each week. You guys are getting the word out and people are listening.
And we really can't express how grateful we are to see our passion project take off. 20 years of love and dedication are here laid bare. Help as much as you care to, but at least watch and talk with us.
Of course, we can't close out a video without giving a shout out to our patrons. Emily Masternardi,
Heinrich 28,
Pammy Poo,
JC Moreland,
Shadow Fox,
Charles Tam,
Arya Gamari,
Lundair Lumen. But also don't forget our channel members, Moose Now,
Jack McLeod,
Plebe 64 Potato,
Lundair Lumen,
7 Star Sanctuary,
and Chained Furry, Many a Mickle Maximuckle.
See you next week.